secret love is like winking at a girl in the dark. It does neither you nor her any good.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Bible Geeks Weekly Podcast. This is episode 84. I'm Brian Sheely.
I'm Ryan Joy.
And thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in. We're in week 44 of the Into the Book Bible reading program, which means we're closing out the Gospel of John in John chapters 19 through 21 and starting out the mysterious yet powerful book of Hebrews. Who wrote the book of Hebrews? I don't know. We'll probably talk about that at some point.
I have theories.
Let's start it off with controversy.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, the stakes are high in this one. We can fight, man.
So what are we going to talk about on the episode?
Well, I was thinking about Halloween. It's that time of year.
Mm-hmm.
What's your favorite Halloween candy?
Straight up, Reese's Peanut Butter Cups.
That is actually the right choice, so I'm glad to hear it.
It's the only choice.
And, it's all candy, so especially when you're a kid, it's all good.
Mm-hmm.
But when you get to spread out your bag of candy, we used to make these piles, and you've got them rated by their value, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then me and my sisters would trade. You try to trade up, or with your friends, I'll give you 4 of these crazy peanut things for something, anything
else.
Even a Tootsie Roll is better than those. and like you're looking around because a Jolly Rancher is good, but a Reese's cup, of course, is better. And you're just trying to go from good to better. And sometimes that's important in life too, to distinguish the good from the better. And so that's something we're going to talk about as we get into Hebrews, which is all about how Jesus is better and the new covenant is better. We're also going to talk about some proverbs about things that are better. And of course, all of the episode will tie in well with Jesus and his superiority because we're finishing up John as well.
Yep. And so let's find Jesus here in week 44, John 19 through 21, Hebrews 1 and 2. Where do you find Jesus here?
I found Jesus in 2 declarations from Pilate that he intended to be ironic, I think, but like Caiaphas, the high priest, back in chapter 11, he's saying more truth than he could understand.
Mm-hmm.
And I suspect that John expects us to notice that. So here we find Jesus is indeed the man. He is indeed the promised king of Israel. And I find it in 2 statements that he makes. One in verse 5 of John 19 says, "So Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. Pilate said to them, 'Behold the man.'"
The man.
And then verses 14 to 15, a little later, it says, "Now it was the day of preparation of the Passover. It was about the 6th hour. He said to the Jews, 'Behold your king.' And they cried out, 'Away with him, crucify him.' And Pilate said to them, 'Shall I crucify your king?' And the chief priests answered," listen to this, "We have no king but Caesar."
Man.
I mean, it's crazy how they backed themselves into a corner and ended up saying that. But he's making fun of the Jews. He's pointing to this beaten, seemingly helpless prisoner saying, "Is this what you're all riled up about? Behold the man." Look, he's got the crown of thorns. He's been taken care of by these soldiers that are mocking him and beating him. But John's gospel began by pointing to the man. That is, Jesus is the Word. And then back in chapter 1, verse 14, the Word made flesh. And he enters the world. And Jesus often calls himself the Son of Man, the one who properly bears God's image and shows us how to be human. So Jesus is the man. Behold the man. And then that second part, he adds insult to injury by saying, "Behold your king." And he even hung a sign in 3 different important languages, Latin and Greek and Hebrew or Aramaic. And so basically all the world can read, whether you're Jew, you're Roman, you're Greek, that Jesus is indeed the King of the Jews. But they kind of indict themselves there at the end, and you wonder if they're looking at each other stunned as the words come out of their mouth.
Mm-hmm.
He says, "We have no king but Caesar." What are we saying? Because throughout the Old Testament, God is supposed to be their king, and they're not supposed to bow to a pagan king. They're not supposed to put anyone else up high. I think of how Mordecai wouldn't kneel to Haman. And the idea is that God and his anointed are supposed to reign over them, and Jesus is their anointed, and yet they're calling Caesar, who calls himself God's son, they're calling him their king rather than the true son of God who has come to save them. And so it makes me think, makes us all hopefully ask, who is our king? Who is my king? Who am I counting on to save us? Who am I willing to publicly own with whatever humiliation or whatever it means? Am I willing to follow Jesus? Am I willing to live like Jesus? Am I willing to bear the cost of following Jesus?
Yeah, I think about that cost even with Jesus' closest disciples. I mean, you could at least give the chief priests kind of a pass, and not a pass, but you could at least understand, since it's kind of consistent with what they've been doing all along. But you saw one of his closest disciples, Peter, saying, I don't know the man. Come on. I mean, this is the opportunity where you can step up and really own Jesus as your king and defend him in that way. But it really is a telling decision point for a lot of people, with the chief priest saying basically something that nobody should have ever said in their position, and then people like Peter saying things that they shouldn't have said in his position. So
yeah, I mean, you think of how they must have been surprised. I brought up how the Jews must have been surprised about that, but Peter was warned that was going to happen.
Yeah.
Jesus told him, and he was like, no, I would never do that. But sometimes in that moment, we get paralyzed by fear, we get affected by that situation, and we show up as a different person than we thought we were going to. And so it's just preparing ourselves and really stabilizing our faith in our identity as followers of Jesus. So, yeah, where did you find Jesus?
Well, in the account later on in the chapter, as Jesus is hanging on the cross right before he dies, I find something that John does here that none of the other Gospels do, and he shows a real intimate, touching moment with Jesus and his mother, which is just so powerful. In John 19, verse 25, but standing by the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister Mary, Mary the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, Woman, behold your son. And then he said to the disciple, Behold your mother. And from that hour, the disciple took her to his own home. And so none of the other Gospels really mention his mom being there, but John does. And just another facet of John's Gospel where he's getting really intimate and revealing some of these touching moments, like when we see how Jesus wept, and now we see this interaction between the disciple who he loved, which a lot of people think is John, but I'm not going to argue too much about it, between him and his mother. And in Jesus' last moments, he is trusting this disciple. He is making arrangements for her, to care for her while he's gone, and to provide for her, and to view this disciple as family now, basically, that he's leaving and he's going to have somebody to take care of her. And why not use his own brothers to take care of his mother? That would seem to make the most sense. But it would appear that his brothers probably didn't believe in him. And the only other time that Mary's mentioned here in the Gospel of John is in John chapter 2, when she seems to think that her son is someone to listen to. And that's when he does his first miracle and changes water to wine and basically tells the servants, hey, whatever he tells you to do, you do it. And so she has a lot of faith in him and trust in him. And he needs to find somebody who believes in him as well to take care of his mother. I think there's a lot of thought put into that. And he puts the two of them together, tells him to care for his mom, tells his mom to view this disciple as his family now. And this is just such a touching and heartbreaking scene. Not only does this show the humanity of Jesus, but I think, as we talked about when we brought up Lazarus a few weeks ago, that it also shows his deity, that God really does care about taking care of family. The character of God is concerned with how we treat those who are closest to us, how we care for them, protect them, how we prepare them for the life after we're gone. And Jesus here, as God in the flesh, is making sure that he's providing for probably one of the most important people in his life, giving her into the hands of probably one of the closest disciples that he has, this disciple who he loves.
What an assignment. That's a lot of trust from Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah, you think about things that we think about that we didn't think about 20 years ago, like life insurance, and just being concerned about what happens to my family if something happens to me. And here Jesus, he knows what's coming, but there is a cost for those who are closest to him. He's not the only one who bears the cost of the cross. Evidently, Joseph, Mary's husband, is dead, it would seem, and Jesus, as her oldest son, has been responsible for her, and he wants somebody else to be looking out for her, in addition to certainly James and Jude become Christians and that kind of thing later, but he wants to put someone in charge that he can trust, and he knows that the beloved disciple will look out for her. It really is quite a moment that reveals a lot about Jesus, about Mary and their relationship. Those two moments you brought up, the John 2 moment and this one, even though she's not brought up a lot here, man, you see a lot about that mother-son relationship there. It's really cool.
All right, so let's get into our next segment, which is Scripture du jour.
What is the soup du jour?
It's the soup of the day.
That sounds good. I'll have that.
So we're transitioning into the book of Hebrews, and in today's reading, it's Hebrews chapter 1. This is just power-packed. The Hebrew writer gets right to the point and just starts firing on all cylinders. So what are you getting out of this chapter that helps you?
He does. This has the feel of a sermon that just starts with a bang.
Yeah.
And it's so beautifully written. And I see here in this big discussion of angels, this point that angels are our ministers. And I think everyone is fascinated by angels.
Sure.
These powerful, majestic beings throughout the Bible. They show up, they bring a message from beyond this world. You see all kinds of books written. You walk down the religious section, you walk down the New Age section, you see there's shows and novels and all kinds of things about them, movies. And we find out in the next chapter 2, verse 2, they were instrumental in the giving of the covenant with Israel, and we can see that in the Old Testament. So the writer here grabs these 3 pairs of Old Testament quotes that are connected together. 5 of them are from the Psalms. And in this chapter, using these quotes, he kind of pulls them together to make the case that even angels worship and serve the anointed king, the Son of God. He is exalted far above every other being, including angels, who the Jews and everybody else, all these Hebrew Christians, and who doesn't, holds them in some high esteem, recognize them as pretty impressive beings. And now he gives, then in verses 13 and 14, he gives a 7th Old Testament quote to complete his argument. And this is a passage that I think any Jewish Christian would recognize immediately from a really important psalm for Christians, Psalm 110. He says, "And to which of the angels has he ever said, 'Sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet'?" And then he goes on to say, "Are they not all ministering spirits sent out to serve for the sake of those who are to inherit salvation?" So Jesus is sitting at the Father's right hand. He's exalted over every other power. But angels aren't just serving the king. They minister to all those who will inherit the salvation of the king. And spoiler alert, that's those of us who are following Jesus, who he has saved. And so he says that angels are spirits sent out to tend to us. And I think I don't want to take this to the point where it starts to sound like we're lowering angels or putting angels down in any way. Think of how Gabriel and Michael are spoken of in the scripture, how they always appear. They've got this shining light, right, from their face, or these white clothes. They do mighty works. They're amazing. They go to and from the presence of God in a way that we haven't. how magnificent, and yet they serve the Son and serve to accomplish his purposes in our lives. And that's the big thing that I just keep thinking about. They're serving for our benefit. There's another psalm that says in Psalm 34, verse 7, the angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him. Mm-hmm. And it's just cool to think about angels as these ministering spirits, and then also to think of angels as kind of a transition or a hinge through which to talk about Jesus. You know, you could even ask someone a question about angels or start to share some thoughts about angels, and I think it might pique their curiosity. And then all of a sudden you share Hebrews 1 and you're talking about Jesus and how he is even greater than angels.
Well, I think the Hebrew writer is just basically lifting up every possible thing or person or entity that somebody could put in front of Jesus and saying, nope, Jesus is better than them. And he starts with angels here, but he continues on and he talks about a lot more important areas where Jesus is better. Just this window into something we don't often find ourselves talking about, which is angels. You know, this helps enlighten us to what angels are really doing, what their work and their role is. But like you said, they are serving the master for his purposes, and he is above them. And really, they're serving us, as he talks about. They're ministering spirits. That's just cool to think about, that powerful of a being serving us in ways that I don't know how to explain, but here it's explained in at least its most basic form.
Absolutely. Yeah. So where did you find something interesting here in this chapter?
Well, there was a lot to pull from, and I had a feeling you were going to talk about angels, which is good, because that's basically what the first chapter is all about. So I went to the beginning here, before he gets into that conversation about angels, and just this one verse that is so poetic, and it's just such a magnificent view of Jesus. This could have easily been a Finding Jesus verse, but it's in Hebrews chapter 1, verse 3. He is the radiance of the glory of God and the exact imprint of his nature, and he upholds the universe by the word of his power. After making purifications for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the majesty on high. And this description of Jesus is so impactful. He's the radiance of God's glory, like shining a light. He is the beams of light coming from God that, just totally lightens up the dark world. He's the exact imprint of his nature, a perfect copy, a perfect representation of God in the flesh. That's Jesus. And he upholds the universe by the word of his power. Hard not to think about Genesis 1. He's the let there be light kind of power. And it's this kind of language, I think, that helps keep us rooted and stable in Christ as we recognize who he is, that he's God in the flesh. The more you can stabilize in the fact that he is as amazing as he is and all of the things he's done, not only just in that first part of the verse, but then he's the one who made purification for sins. And he's sitting at the right hand of the majesty on high now. You just think about that. And you think about how amazing he is. I mean, the Hebrew writer could have really stopped right there in making the case for sticking with Christ and not going back to the old law like this Jewish audience was trying to do because of persecution and difficulty and all the things that they were going through. He could have just stopped right there, but he doesn't. He goes on, but he's establishing, I think, the groundwork for why Jesus is better. And no man, no created thing is more radiant or godly or powerful than Christ. And though, really, I'm not tempted to go back to the old law, I don't think you just want to go out and offer animal sacrifices either. Does Jesus really keep me from returning to my old life of sin is probably a good question to ask as I think about how amazing he is and how there's really nothing better that I can focus my time and attention on.
Yeah. What's going to keep us from backsliding? It's this glorious picture, a high view of Jesus and fully understanding, I guess you could say, the doctrine of who he really is.
Sure.
And it's really important that we don't just keep going to practical applications about here's some wisdom for how to live. That's really important. But just like we always do at the beginning of these podcasts, it's really important that we keep coming back to who Jesus is, because that's where we're going to find the power, the strength, the ideal, the way to God. And that's where the more we can see him clearly, the more we'll be able to hang on to that which will allow us to bear the fruit that we want to bear in our lives.
All right, so let's get into our last segment here, which is top 4 proverbs.
1, 2, 3, 4.
So we're talking about some better things. And on the heels of talking through the book of Hebrews, and as we're getting into studying Hebrews here, Jesus is obviously better than everything. But as we go back to the Proverbs, the subject of better is also a very important construct that we need to continue to focus on. And Proverbs has a lot to say about what is better than something else. So what are we finding here in our first proverb that is better than something else?
The first one I chose is that it's better to be poor than to lose your integrity. And this is in Proverbs 28, verse 6. It says, "Better is a poor person who walks in his integrity than a rich man who is crooked in his ways." The poor person might be looked down upon, might have difficulty paying the bills, feeding his family, but he still has his soul. He can still look at himself in the mirror the next day. He can still call upon the Lord with an upright heart, asking for his help. The crooked person might have lots of false friends, might have an easy, comfortable life, money in the bank that we might think will give him security. But you think about the rich fool, you think about how secure you really are, how transient all these things are. It might not be enough to give him peace of mind at night, and it certainly can't be relied upon to see him through to the end. And so this word integrity, as you, I think, know, this is an important word to me and probably to all of us. It's about wholeness. It's about straightness, not being twisted, not being divided within ourselves. Of course, it has to do with being true to who you say you are, speaking the truth, being aligned with your principles and true to what you know is right, inside, outside, and in every way. And whenever you get out of line with that, to own it, to make it right, to do what you can, to rebuild, to stabilize your integrity. And sometimes, I guess the big thing about this whole better than idea is that sometimes we have to make hard choices. And what will we hold on to guide us? We might look for the most advantageous outcome, or we can let our principles guide us, let what we know is right guide us, and hold on to our integrity and deal with the consequences of that. And sometimes I think if we decide who we are, kind of like Daniel purposed in his heart before anything happened, or Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, or some of the great figures throughout the scripture decided who they were. They knew who they were. And then when the moment of trial, of question came, then it was like there was no choice really, because it was so clear what was right, and you do what you have to do. And if you have constrained yourself to following Christ, then you know what you have to do.
I like that you brought up consequences there, because walking in integrity is going to mean that we're not popular with the world. We're not everyone's best friend. I think it's so easy for the crooked or two-faced person to just play to all sides and try to become a different person in different circumstances and sweet talk people and all the things that somebody who is crooked might do to please people. But in someone who walks with integrity is going to step on toes in general, and there will be consequences to pay for it. Like you talked about in those examples with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I don't know what God's going to do, but you know what I'm not going to do? I'm not going to sin against God, because if he wants to save us, fine. If he doesn't want to save us, we're fine with that too. And that's the kind of integrity that we should be living with, contrasted, I guess, with someone like Peter in his denials of Jesus that we talked about, who couldn't stand up for what he said he wanted to stand up for in the moment of decision.
With the Peter example, I think one thing that's important to see, goes back, I guess, to finding Jesus in this, is how John's gospel ends, where Jesus kind of gives him a chance to be restored and to restore his integrity. And just like he denied him 3 times, Jesus asked him 3 times, do you love me? And he affirms his love, and Jesus directs him then what to do. Here's what you have to do, feed my sheep. And so even whenever we do lose our way, as Peter did, we do get out of sorts, Jesus has the ability to restore us, to restore our integrity. Jesus did that work for Peter, and Peter would have, I'm sure, given anything to have not done that afterwards. It's not like it makes it all better. He had to live for the rest of his life with that denial. You don't want that, but we can be restored. And then it's on us to, again, renew our commitment. I do love you. I will feed your sheep. I will do what I need to do. And so sometimes we lose our way, but get back and don't lose your soul in that whole process.
Yeah, I think that's important to add to that as well. It's not just one or the other. There is a way back if you want it. And that's a comforting thing to remember. So here in the second proverb, my proverb here about better, in Proverb 3, verses 13 through 15, we find out that wisdom is better than anything you could ever want. And so it says, blessed is the one who finds wisdom and the one who gets understanding. For the gain from her is better than gain from silver, and her profit better than gold. She is more precious than jewels, and nothing you desire can compare with her. Whew. That's cool. That's a cool way of putting that, I think. And this is the first better comparison, I think, that we find in the book of Proverbs. And I think it might be one of the most important. If we're looking for anything that we should desire, wisdom should top the list. And there's so many things here in our modern society in 2020 that we can desire, that I desire. We look for a new house, that shiny new iPhone 12, or a dream vacation, or whatever it is. But nothing compares to the value and usefulness of wisdom and understanding. Put that on your birthday wish list, right? But I wonder sometimes why I don't prioritize wisdom as much as I should. Wisdom is not typically the first thing that comes into my mind when I think about what I want and what I desire. And maybe it's because I'm too distracted with all the stress of life and everything that's going on. Maybe it's because I just don't see how valuable it is. Or maybe it's just I'm too wrapped up in all the allurements of the world around me. But wisdom is something that starts small, and I think it starts with curiosity, and it starts with a fear of the Lord, and it's something that we pursue and cultivate. We have to find it. We are pursuing wisdom, but it shows in our daily interactions with how we handle all the situations of life. And later on in Proverbs 3, he goes on to talk about some things that wisdom helps us to do, and it changes our daily interactions with fear and uncertainty. It changes how we treat our neighbors and people who are in need. It changes how we view angry people and tells us not to envy the world around us, and all the things, just naming a few, that wisdom helps us to do. Wisdom is so valuable, and it's something we should just put at the top of our list as better than pretty much everything else that we can pursue in life.
Yeah, we talked last week. You brought up the question about what is my purpose, and thinking about our goals and what we're here to do. And somebody asked in a book I read years ago, what is the defining metaphor through which you view life? And I've always thought that was an interesting question, and the book brought up different ways that you might view life, and that people do. And certainly we have many, and the Bible uses many different ones. We might think of life as a battle or a competition. We might think of it as a game, or, like a vacation, where we're just trying to have as much fun and happiness as we can. And I think from the perspective of wisdom, you have to view life as a training or a schoolroom or an apprenticeship where you're being developed to live better, to live more skillfully. And I think as we think about what is the game, what is the goal, what's the point of all of this, part of how we glorify God in life is recognizing that every day I need to be getting better at life. I need to be hungry to learn, not just factoids, not just information and trying to consume just the endless stream of data that comes at us, the news, all of this stuff. But how do I get better at living? How do I love people better? How do I listen to the people in my life better? How do I make better choices with my money, with my work, with my influence, everything, every part of life, and learning to really get passionate about wisdom, because what you just said, it's better to be wise than anything else you desire, because through wisdom comes the ability to get other things done, to make a difference and to bless others and even be blessed.
That's definitely true. It's at the top. So where are we going with proverb number 3?
Number 3, you could summarize it as, it's better to step out of your comfort zone to correct someone than to stay in your comfort zone and avoid expressing your love. So there's a lot in this, but it's a very short proverb, but man, it's pretty packed. Proverbs 27 verse 5. Better is open rebuke than hidden love.
That steps on my toes a little bit.
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah, me too. I think this is one that I'll remember. It's short. It's very memorable. There's that Beatles song, "Hey, you've got to hide your love away." You know that song?
Yes, I do.
And sometimes we want to keep our love kind of comfortably hidden within ourselves, but it doesn't do anyone good when it's locked up in secret. On the other hand, whenever we correct someone or whenever we ourselves are corrected, though we don't like it, it's uncomfortable in both cases for most of us. Mm-hmm. It's painful. I hate correcting. I'd rather be corrected than to correct someone. Any day. I would, every day of the week, rather be corrected than to correct someone. But at least that has the potential to do some good for me or for the person I'm correcting. And I love this quote from Bruce Waltke, who's an Old Testament scholar I really like. He wrote, "Hidden love expresses selfishness. For the lover cowardly, timidly, or lethargically refuses to risk himself in the best interest of the beloved. Secret love is like winking at a girl in the dark. It does neither you nor her any good. Open, loving rebuke is potent. Hidden love is impotent. Out of love for their children, parents rebuke them." Proverbs 13:24. "Even as God, out of his love, picks up where the parent leaves off and continues to rebuke his children." Proverbs 3, verses 11 to 12. Love and correction go hand in hand. The command, "rebuke your neighbor frankly," in Leviticus 19:17, is followed by the command, "love your neighbor as yourself," Leviticus 19:18. The next verse is, "love your neighbor as yourself." The verse before it is, "reason with your neighbor frankly." Be truthful, be honest, tell them what they need to hear. So yeah, comfort zone and opening ourselves up enough to speak love, even to speak correction or to say, "Hey, this wasn't the thing that you should have done here," is better than hidden love.
Well, and I think in so many ways, it's our approach that can really make the difference with that. Just that gentleness and that love and sincere concern for people. If we can show that in how we openly rebuke them, then at least that has a chance in some small way to help them see that we're not on the attack. And I think for the amount of times that I have been corrected and received it well, that was always done by somebody who was thoughtfully and lovingly giving me that correction. Sometimes you need to shake people, and I get that. But sometimes shaking somebody will just cause them to lose heart. And that wisdom and discernment, knowing in what scenario that kind of discipline and correction is needed, is a really important skill to develop. But yeah, just letting somebody walk around with mustard on their face is not very loving, really, I think is what you're bringing out here.
Yeah. The mustard on your face principle. That's good. So what's proverb number 4?
All right. So the last one here is that lowliness is better than pride. Proverbs 16, verse 18. "Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. It is better to be of a lowly spirit with the poor than to divide the spoil with the proud." And I think most every one of us would say that we would rather have enough money or maybe more money than we need than having not enough. Here, the comparison is that pride is not something we should want in the same way that we want money or wealth. That pride, if it comes with all of this wealth and attention and fame and everything that some people are striving so strongly for, that pride is really not going to lead you anywhere good. It's better to be lowly and humble and meek and poor than to be that kind of arrogant person. And that's really what we see in Jesus' life. He didn't own multiple houses. He wasn't out there with the fanciest and the nicest and the most expensive kinds of possessions. He really was pretty poor by the world's comparison, but he was humble. He was lowly. He came in meekness, and he showed us really what it's like to be this kind of lowly spirit, this meek and gentle person, in that he wasn't out there trying to become this arrogant, popular, prideful, puffed up kind of person.
Yeah, there's another one of Jesus' parables kind of draws from another one of the better than Proverbs in Proverbs 25:6-7 that goes with this. It says, "Do not put yourself forward in the king's presence or stand in the place of the great, for it's better to be told, 'Come up here,' than to be put lower in the presence of a noble." And that idea of self-promotion and always trying to you got to put yourself out there. You got to climb, got to network, you got to make yourself, everybody needs to know who you are. Just get out there on Twitter, do what you got to do, make yourself look good, fight for your place. I earned it. What's up? This is the message I see constantly, especially given to our young people, just as I look around at the messages and the shows and the books I see, the articles, the songs. And look, if you put yourself in that place, you're going to get embarrassed sometimes because you can't give yourself the right to do the job or to have the authority. You have to earn that. And whenever it's given to you because you're ready for it,
Yeah. And that popular phrase, if I won't fight for me, who else will?
Right.
Yeah. It's just not something we need to be so focused on, because it's better for us to be humble and lowly and put ourselves last and allow God to put us first if he so chooses. And that's totally in his control, and he's promised that he would, but it's not our place to push ourselves out there and try to puff ourselves up and make ourselves the center of all attention. And I guess it just kind of has me asking myself, what am I overly proud of? And how does that pride impact me? I think all of us, no matter who we are, if you're really honest with yourself, there are areas probably of your life that you are more proud of, or that you place more focus on or attention to. I think about it with me. How much am I willing to learn from other people? Or do I just think I have nothing to learn? I know what I need to know. Or do I see my sin as clearly as I could? I think pride will blind me, and does blind me, to a lot of things that are going on in my own life. And do I see those things as clearly as I should? Do I jump to conclusions and trust in myself, trust in my own knowledge, trust in all of the facts that I've acquired for myself? Or am I curious? Am I staying open? Am I soft-hearted to really listening and seeing a situation clearly? It sounds so much, in my viewpoint, like hard-heartedness syndrome that we find throughout the Bible, and it's something I want to avoid at all costs. That's not always easy when our culture, like you talked about, is promoting this self-promotion kind of lifestyle.
I guess part of this is that, in a way, humility works. It does tend to place you. You just see it in lives, young people, old people. You see how whenever you're proud, you could say that works to produce a certain kind of thing, but it does ultimately bring, as the wise writer says, a fall. It goes before your destruction. And humility brings a different kind of measured careful, slow growth in your effectiveness, in your ability to bless others and be a blessing. It's a totally different, going back to the what is our purpose and what's the metaphor for your life. It's not the best way maybe to climb to the top of some kind of very unsteady ladder, but it is the best way to go through your life, growing in wisdom, as you say, and growing your influence and ability to properly affect change in the world.
And again, you just see that in the life of Jesus so much.
Yeah.
And as we just got done studying John, here he is at his crucifixion, and none of the Jews, none of the people that he came there for really want to own him as the king. And he could have done so many different things in his life to guarantee that they would all shout, "He's our king, let him go." But none of those things would have really accomplished God's true purpose. And none of those things, were healthy and helping them to walk with integrity. It was all there so that they could see what a true godly life looks like, what the express image of God looks like. And just wrapping this all up, I guess, lowliness is definitely effective, but it doesn't seem to be on paper a lot of times.
For I am meek and lowly of heart, and you will find rest for your souls.
Yep. So let's get into our challenge this week. And we've been talking about Jesus. We have been studying about Jesus. Let's sing a song of praise to Jesus this week. Maybe you'll do that in your Sunday worship service. Maybe you'll do that at home with your family. But sing a song of praise to Jesus this week and think about how amazing he is. And doing that in song, I think, just really adds some weight to the things that we've been talking about with his life and his amazingness.
Absolutely. Let the beauty of Jesus be seen in me.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning into the Bible Geeks podcast. You can find us on our website at BibleGeeks.fm. You can find show notes for this episode at BibleGeeks.fm/84. If you want to follow along with our Into the Book Bible reading program, that's at BibleGeeks.fm/IntoTheBook. And oh, by the way, you can contact us, reach out, ask us a question, tell us something you want to hear on upcoming episodes. That's at BibleGeeks.fm/contact. And until next week, everyone, may the Lord bless you and keep you.
Shalom.